Hello and welcome to Sawers the Good Food Stories. My brother underwent a quadruple bypass last week since having a massive heart attack 18 months ago. The surgery went well and he is now recovering. Researching this episode helped me take my mind off the anxiety. I hope it takes your mind off whatever life might be throwing at you too.
Hi, I'm Sarah, and these are my two girls. Together, we live with my folks, John and Diana, along the Whale Coast in the beautiful Overberg of South Africa. We are the Sawers family, and we have an interesting history as fishmongers in Scotland and Ireland, dating back to 1876. Here we share some of that history of a bygone era with stories of food, fish, and family. So please subscribe and join us as we uncover some fascinating stories.
Now, I had grand plans of taking you to our local harbour and watching the fishing boats offloading their catches. But alas, I am somewhat of an ignoramus when it comes to fishing. Yes, right now we're in the middle of winter with heavy rains and wind, so the boats are docked in harbour, waiting for a few clear days to head out. We'll try again when the weather improves. Instead, I headed to our local fish shop and spoke to the owner about their fishing processes. Turns out that on weeks like these, where no fresh catches are coming in, these fishmongers have a store of frozen fish that they defrost for the shop each day. Interesting. It makes sense. I never really gave it any thought. I'm guessing that this is common practice amongst fishmongers across the world nowadays. Of more interest is the article I found in the Great Tome, dated 1933, titled Famine in Glasgow. It tells of the market's worst experience in its history as a result of storms at sea and no fish being caught for 10 days. This pushed prices up and caused all sorts of havoc back in Glasgow and the fish market. No proper refrigeration meant fish famine. Back at our local shop, I asked about their freezing process. I've heard a lot is done at sea these days, but no, that's really only for the big guys. Here they have a state-of-the-art flash freezing facility at the back of the shop. I asked if I could check it out and film for my channel. A polite no. It might look nothing from the outside, but it turns out this freezing facility behind me is top secret. Yes, I'm serious, top secret. Proprietary knowledge is your edge in a hugely competitive world. You can't ever let your trade secrets out, not even with my wee channel on YouTube. The risk is too high. Today's adventure takes us back in time, again, to the Glasgow Fish Market, a very different place to what we see now in modern fish markets. An aesthetically pleasing place. Dare I say, a more human place? Cast your mind back to a time where horse-drawn carts and carriages were the main form of transport, a time where ice was the only form of refrigeration. It's 1873 and the Glasgow Fish Market has just opened in Bridgegate, located on the River Clyde, the first enclosed market of its kind, fondly known as the Briggait. In 1876, the same year J&T Sawers opened their doors, Bridgegate, London, the largest inland fish market in the UK then and still today, opened in their new and permanent enclosed building. Prior to that, most markets had been open and informal. With the industrial age going full throttle, demand for more purpose-built structures increased. Glasgow was the second biggest growing city in Britain at that time, which is not surprising when you realize that fishing was a very important trade in Scotland. The Victorian age was a pivotal moment in history that led to the development and improvements of cities, infrastructure, and the general quality of life in Britain. The first time in British history when war was replaced with growth and development. The first industrial age. People were flocking to the cities. These cities were not prepared or built for such an influx, like the Irish immigration to Scotland in the 1800s. Their vast numbers arriving in Glasgow meant people ended up living in squalor and cramped environments. Disease was rife and sanitation non-existent. Something had to change, and quickly. The government and city planners had to take action. City Improvement Acts were introduced and the landscape of cities like Glasgow started to change. The area where the Glasgow Fish Market was built had previously been occupied by merchants' mansions, and the Merchant Hall, with its famous steeple that still stands today in the middle of the Briggait. Needless to say, after centuries of war, famine, and hard times, life was improving for the average man and woman. It was a good time in the history of humankind to be alive. Now, I say that in rather a general, sweeping way, bearing in mind that if you were lower working class, life still sucked. I've just read a piece from Bill Bryson's At Home where servants were treated like crap and worked harder than any person I know today. So as much as the quality of life was improving for the majority of people, it was still very hard. In London alone, women made up most of the workforce. A third were servants, while another third were prostitutes. Not great options there, but alas, I digress. Two of the most life-changing inventions of this era were, of course, the railway and ice. The railway had been running through Glasgow since 1864. As the city started to grow and develop, a line was built straight to Bridgegate. Now the fish market had the merchant ships and the railway almost on its doorstep. It was booming, and over the next 2 decades it expanded to twice its original size. Ice, of course, was essential to the long-distance hauling of fish on the railways and to the preservation of fish in the market. Ice has a fascinating history. It deserves an entire episode of its own. The article I found in the great tome dates back to the 1920s. By then, the market and Sawers Limited had been running for more than 45 years. They were well established. At this stage, Sawyers Limited had 12 branches in Glasgow and a fleet of motorised vehicles, all with witty names like Miss Haddock, Miss Crab, and Miss Place. Sawyers Limited was the biggest buyer in the Glasgow Fish Market and could apparently command any exotic sea creature, such as a shark, porpoise, turtle, or monkfish, as a centerpiece for their displays in Howard Street, the headquarters. The Sawyers displays were legendary. I found several articles written by individuals who truly appreciated the art of the Sawyers window displays. But that's for another episode. Let's head back in time once again to the 1920s article I mentioned. Yes, it's story time. In Glasgow Fish Market, during the year 1922, no fewer than 1,398,000 boxes of fish were handled. Of that total, more than one half, 714,000 boxes, were kippered herring. Glasgow, in addition to being an inlet market for fish, is an outlet market for herrings. In other words, while most of the fresh fish is distributed throughout Glasgow and the west of Scotland, a very large proportion of the herrings go to London and other places in the south. Than Glasgow Fish Market, few places are more busy during the early hours of the morning. From 6:30 till 9 o'clock, the fish pours in. The Aberdeen Fish Express is among the first trains arriving as a rule between 6 and 6:30. She is followed by trains from Granton in Edinburgh on the east and quite a number of places on the west, Ayr, Ardrossan, Fairley and Gourock, to mention but a few. The commission agents and wholesale dealers are busy auctioning the fish. An auctioneer may be standing on a pile of boxes which raises him from 6 to 10 feet above the crowd of eager buyers. Generally speaking, flatfish are sold by the pound, while haddocks, cod, whiting, ling, saithe and mackerel are sold by the box. A good deal of cod labelled as headless cod is sold by the stone instead of by the box. Thereon hangs a tale. 15 years ago, headless cod was unheard of in Glasgow markets. But about that time, Aberdeen dealers were becoming dangerous rivals of Glasgow merchants. The Aberdonian, for reasons of economy, removed the heads of the cod so as to save carriage before he sent them to Glasgow retailers. Other dealers saw the reasonableness of beheading the cod, and the practice soon spread. Headless cod, however, does not suit everybody. Several shipping firms insist upon getting whole fish for use on their liners. The fish is kept in the ice store until it is required, and then the heads are used for making cod soup, a delicacy which is recommended by many medical men in cases where light, nutritious diet is essential. Readers who have not tried cod soup would be well advised to do so. He continues, an endless variety of vehicles are to be seen both outside and inside the fish market. The big retailer, the man with a plurality of shops, has a fleet of modern motor vehicles in waiting. But there are also many horse-drawn vehicles. lorries, heavy and light, vans, and even coster-like barrows. The hawker usually comes in at the tail end of the market and picks up what is left after the wants of the retailer have been supplied. I suspect one of the big retailers with the plurality of shops he refers to was Sawers Limited. By then, it had changed to a limited liability company, and all four of Thomas Sawers Sr.'s sons worked in the business. John, the founder, Thomas Jr., George, and William, my great-granddad. Before Miss Haddock, Miss Crab, and Miss Place were on the scene, there were horses and carriages. I found an article in the Tome talking about the stables at the back of the shop for 40 horses, with a utility and groomsman room. These horses and carriages were used to collect supplies from the fish market, as well as to deliver orders to housewives across the city. In fact, we have what is called a rose bowl in our living room. It's actually called the Challenge Cup. On it, it says, "For the best horse and two-wheeled light delivery van," which Sawers won 3 times from 1900 to 1906. Sadly, I can't find a pic of any of the horses and carriages, but here's a visual idea. It's very easy to romanticize an era like that when one is unaware of the day-to-day realities of life and business. As I mentioned earlier, having read some of interesting facts from Bill Bryson, I know from other articles I've read in the Great Tome that there were all sorts of issues to deal with as a large retailer like Sawers Limited, from theft and poaching to quality control and social responsibility, to name but a few. However, I think the challenges faced and the determination required by people living in the 19th century make our lives today, with their quick fix press button solutions, appear vanilla flavored and colorless by comparison. The old Glasgow Fish Market, as it's known today, closed its doors in the Briggait in 1977 and moved to more modern premises, leaving the Briggait to stand empty for a decade before being converted into a failed shopping centre and then finally renovated to a public art centre. Fish markets the world over continue in various forms or another. Refrigeration has completely changed the way markets handle fish today, and I'm sure things will change even more as we head further into the world of technology. In fact, I saw this week an Israeli company that has developed a 3D printing machine that is able to take the cells of different fish or animals and print a perfect reproduction. The mind boggles. I wonder if Victorians were alive today, what they would think. If you're a lover of all things historical, I highly recommend you read Bill Bryson's At Home. What a fun and fascinating trip back in time through the eyes of our homes. On that note, I'll say goodbye and thanks for joining me again. I hope you enjoyed this fishy tale. See you all again soon. Take care and keep smiling.